Erev Tov Rabotai, we're continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bikkurim. We're up to Perek Aleph, Mishnah Yud Aleph. Today's Mishnah should be Leilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svedlana, Aranbayev, Neliyahu ben Burcha Yisraelov, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. In Mishnah 6, we cited a machloket, a dispute regarding someone who bought 2 trees in the land of another person. According to the Tanna Kama, the buyer brings Bikkurim but does not recite the passage, but Rabbi Meir requires him to read the passages as well. This Mishnah states the halacha that applies where someone bought 3 trees. If someone buys 3 trees that are in the property of another person, he brings Bikkurim from their fruits and recites the passage, because a sale of 3 or more trees includes the land on which they grow, even if the land was not actually mentioned by the seller or the buyer, and therefore the buyer owns not only the trees but also the land beneath them, which makes him obligated in all the laws of Bikkurim. We spoke about it more in Mishnah 6. Rabbi Meir says, Afilu Shnaim, even if someone bought only 2 trees, he brings Bikkurim from their fruit and recites the passage, like Rabbi Meir himself said in Mishnah 6, and certainly if he bought 3 trees. Now, although Rabbi Meir's ruling was already cited in Mishnah 6, it's repeated here, because the Mefarshim explain, based on that Mishnah alone, it could have been thought that Rabbi Meir requires even someone who buys a single tree to bring Bikkurim and recite the passage. Rabbi Meir did not say so there only because that the Mishnah deals exclusively with the case of buying 2 trees. So our Mishnah teaches that this is not correct. Since Rabbi Meir says in our Mishnah, Afilu Shnaim, even 2, it's clear that he requires the owner to bring Bikkurim and recite the passage only in the case of 2 trees. Because if he held the same in the case of 1 tree, he would have said Afilu Echad, even 1. Rather, in the case of 1 tree, Rabbi Meir rules that the passage is not recited, like we explained in this Mishnah. Right, and if you go back, you see in Mishnah 6, Mishnah was talking about that Koneh Shnei Ilanot, and Rabbi Meir says Mevi v'koreh, so you would have thought maybe it even applies to 1. Therefore, it's repeated here to tell you Rabbi Meir Omer Afilu Shnaim, even 2, meaning 2 is the minimum to bring and recite. The Mishnah now deals with the purchase of a single tree. Kanailan v'karkao mevi v'koreh. If someone bought a single tree together with its land, meaning the land was explicitly included in the sale, mevi v'koreh, all agree that he brings Bikkurim from that tree and recites the passage, since he owns the land beneath the tree. Just before we continue explaining this, I forgot on the previous step, the Rav says, and the Rabbi Meir, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Meir. You can only recite the Bikkurim passage if you buy 3 or more trees, not like Rabbi Meir said 2 or more. Continuing, like we just said, Kanailan v'karkao, if someone bought a single tree together with its land, the land was explicitly included in the sale, Mevi v'koreh, all agree that he brings Bikkurim from that tree and recites the passage, since he owns the land beneath the tree. However, if the land was not explicitly included in the sale, the buyer acquires only the tree and not the land. He would therefore be exempt from having to bring Bikkurim at all. Right, because we explained the land was explicitly included in the sale. But if it was not explicitly included in the sale, he would be exempt from having to bring Bikkurim at all, like it says in the Tosefta, chapter 1, Mishnah 2. Now, this is the view of the Tanna Kama. According to Rabbi Meir, though, there is a question whether one who buys a single tree also acquires the land. Therefore, he brings Bikkurim, but he does not recite the passage, because it might be untruthful for him to say, the land that you have given me, Hashem. Now, the Mishnah concludes, we learned in Mishnah 2 that sharecroppers and tenant farmers do not bring Bikkurim at all from the produce of the land on which they work, because that land does not belong to them. The Mishnah cites now Rabbi Yehuda, who disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says, Af ba'ale arisut v'chachorot mevi'in v'korin. Even sharecroppers and tenant farmers bring Bikkurim and recite the passage. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the right of a sharecropper or tenant farmer to take a share of the crops gives him some degree of ownership in the land. This level of ownership is enough for him to be obligated to bring Bikkurim and recite the passage. And the Mefarshim explain, Rabbi Yehuda refers to sharecroppers and tenant farmers who have the exclusive rights to work particular fields and are thus entitled to a share of the produce forever, in contrast to those who are granted the right to work the land and take a share of its produce only 1 year at a time. Now, sharecroppers and tenant farmers who have exclusive rights they enjoy such a strong hold in the land that they are obligated to bring bikurim from its fruits, according to Rabbi Yehuda. But the Rav tells us, "Ven halacha Rabbi Yehuda." The halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha follows the Tanakama, the Tana that we mentioned in Mishnah 2, that sharecroppers and tenant farmers do not bring bikurim at all because that land does not belong to them. Right? And the halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda. That's the end, Rabotai, of Perek Aleph, Mishnah Yud Aleph. We begin now with Perek Bet, Mishnah Aleph. The first part of this parak of this chapter, Bet, compares Tirumah, Bikkurim, and Maaser Sheni with one another. It starts by listing laws that apply to both Tirumah and Bikkurim, but not to Maaser Sheni. HaTirumah v'Bikkurim, Tirumah and Bikkurim have the following laws in common. Chayavim Alayev Mita. Non-Kohanim are liable to an early death at the hands of heaven for eating them knowingly, meaning knowing that the food is Tirumah or Bikkurim and knowing the severity of the sin. The Mefarshim explain, before we continue, the Torah states this halakha in connection with Tirumah in Tzeva Vayikra, chapter 22, pasuk 9, but it is understood as applying to Bikkurim as well, because the Torah in Tzeva Dvarim, chapter 12, pasuk 17, refers to Bikkurim as Tirumah. Now, the Torah's description of Bikkurim as Tirumah establishes a general link between Bikkurim and Tirumah, from which we learn that Bikkurim have the same holiness as Tirumah, and therefore it's subject to many laws, many of the Tirumah's laws. Now, this is the biblical basis for the rulings of our Mishnah. Each halakha taught by the Mishnah appears in the Torah in regards to Bikkurim, but it's extended to, in regards to Tirumah, but it's extended to Bikkurim because Bikkurim have a similar status. So we continue. Chayvim Alayev Mita. Non-Kohanim are liable to an early death for eating them knowingly. V'chomesh, and non-Kohanim who ate them by mistake, meaning without knowing that the food is Tirumah or Bikkurim, or without knowing the severity of the sin, they must pay a Kohen the value of what they ate plus a fifth, a quarter of the value, which is a fifth of the final total, right? Because we know a non-Kohen who eats Tirumah or Bikkurim pays the value of what he ate to the Kohen who owned it, and he pays the fifth to any Kohen he wants. Like the Rav explained in Mishna Yomi, chapter 6, Mishnah 2. If the Tirumah had not yet been given to a Kohen, he also pays its basic value to any Kohen of his choosing, but if it had already been given to a Kohen, he pays back the principal to that Kohen and the fifth to whoever he wants. V'asurim nezarim, and Tirumah and Bikkurim are forbidden to non-Kohanim to eat, because since the Mishnah just taught that a non-Kohen is punished with early death or payment of the fifth for eating Tirumah or Bikkurim, it goes without saying that he's prohibited to eat them. But the Mefarshim explain the reason the Mishnah is adding against what's obvious, V'asurim nezarim, is to teach that a non-Kohen may not eat even the smallest amount of Tirumah and Bikkurim. Now, although he would not be punished in the ways that we mentioned by Chomesh or by Mita, unless the amount eaten was at least a kazait, the size of an olive, he's still forbidden to eat any amount, like we say, asur b'kol shehu. Vem nichse Kohen, and they're completely the property of the Kohen to whom they are given, meaning Tirumah and Bikkurim become the personal property of the Kohen to whom they are given, rather than the property of heaven. Now, right, rather than being the property of heaven that the Kohen merely has a right to eat, they belong to him personally, right? Therefore, the Kohen may not only eat Tirumah or Bikkurim, but he also may use it for any other purpose, as long as he does not destroy or damage it. We're going to see that more in chapter 3, Mishnah 12. Ve'olin be'echad u'mea, and Tirumah and Bikkurim that became mixed with permitted produce are nullified in 101, meaning if one part of Tirumah or Bikkurim becomes mixed with 100 parts of permitted produce, the Tirumah or Bikkurim is nullified, and so the mixture is permitted even to non-Kohanim. Now, generally, if prohibited dry food becomes mixed with permitted dry food of the same type, right? Yavesh bi'yavesh b'mino, right? For example, a piece of non-kosher meat becomes mixed with pieces of kosher meat, and we cannot tell them apart. Usually we have a simple majority of the permitted food to nullify the minority of forbidden food, and all the pieces will be permitted. But in some cases, the mixture is not permitted unless the permitted food is 60 times larger than the forbidden food. But the rabbis decreed that in a mixture of Tirumah, Bikkurim, and permitted food of the same type, if they became mixed, the mixture is not permitted unless there are at least 100 parts of permitted food for each part of Tirumah. We spoke about it in Mishnah Masechet Tirumah, chapter 4, Mishnah 7, Rama Melchot Tirumah, chapter 13, Halacha 1. You need 100 parts of permitted food for each part of Tirumah. Ut'unin rechitzat yadayim, they require hand washing, meaning before a Kohen eats Tirumah Bikkurim, he must wash his hands. Midrabanan, we know a person's hands are sheni l'tumah, secondary level of Tumah. So if a sheni l'tumah touches holy food, like tirumar bikurim or a korban, sacrificial meat, it makes the holy food asul, prohibited to be eaten. Therefore, before eating tirumar bikurim, a kohen must remove the tumah from his hands by washing them in a procedure called netilat yadayim, in which water is poured from a vessel onto the hands. Now, in order to get, this is a side point, in order to get kohanim into the habit of doing netilat yadayim, the rabbis decree that any Jew who eats bread, even if it's not sacred, must do netilat yadayim first. Gemara Masechet Chulin, page 106a. Also Mishnah Bura, Or Chaim, Siman 158, Halacha Sif Katan 1. V'ha'arev shemesh, and they require sunset, meaning after he tamek kohen immerses in a mikveh, he must wait until nightfall before he may eat tirumah or bikurim. Now, although immersion in a mikveh removes the main tumah immediately, a trace of the tumah remains until nightfall. For this reason, a kohen who immersed must wait until nightfall before he may eat tirumah or bikurim. Gemara Masechet Yevamot, page 74b, as the Mefarshim point out. Hare elu bitrumah or bikurim mashen ken b'maser. These are laws that apply to tirumah and bikurim, but not to maser sheni. As the Mefarshim add, right? Because someone who ate maaser sheni knowingly outside of Yerushalayim is not liable to an early death at the hands of heaven. One who ate it by mistake does not have to pay the fifth. Maaser sheni may be eaten in Yerushalayim even by non-kohanim. Maaser sheni does not completely belong to its owner, because the Mefarshim add, the owner of maaser sheni does not have the right to use it for whatever he wants. He must take it to Yerushalayim and eat it there, because although the Torah allows him to redeem it with money, the money then has a sanctity of maaser sheni and may be used only to buy food in Yerushalayim. We learned this in Mishnah Masechet Maaser Sheni, chapter 1, Mishnah 3-7. Maaser Sheni that became mixed with permitted produce is nullified in a simple majority. There's no obligation to wash one's hands before eating Maaser Sheni, because even though we explained a person's hands are Sheni to Tumah, something with this level of Tumah can contaminate Tirumah, Bikurim, and other sacred foods, but it cannot contaminate Maaser Sheni, and therefore you don't have to wash your hands before eating Maaser Sheni. And a Tameh person who immersed in the mikveh may eat Maaser Sheni right away. In fact, Mefarshim point out there are other laws that apply to Tirumah and Bikurim, but not to Maaser Sheni. For example, it's possible to redeem Maaser Sheni with money, which cannot be done with Tirumah and Bikurim. The Mishnah is not listing every difference, but in any event, that is some of the differences that apply to Tirumah and Bikurim, but not to Maaser Sheni. Some of the halachot that apply to Tirumah and Bikurim, Tirumah and Bikurim, but not to Maaser Sheni. That is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.